welcome you to this session called Sprint Planning Event from Ground Zero, Do's and Don'ts. In this session, we are going to learn Do's, that is how to conduct sprint planning event from ground zero, Don'ts, that is some anti-patterns that can derail your sprint planning event. Yeah. So I wanted to first talk about the sprint framework. As you know, we have a product backlog, we have a product owner. So he brings up the prioritized user stories to the sprint planning meeting. And then we are now going to discuss about the sprint planning event here. And then the outcome of sprint planning meeting is sprint backlog. Now the question is, what is this sprint is all about? Let's get the context set for the sprint. Sprint usually, it is a repetitive fixed duration time frames. It can be, usually it's a 2 weeks duration. Okay. So, but however, theoretically, you can span from 1 week to 4 weeks. Okay. But the moment you decide that my sprint duration is 2 weeks long, then all the sprint should have 2 weeks only. Okay. Let's understand the sprint. The sprint is the heartbeat of the Scrum, like the way heart beats, right? It beats in a rhythm. Similarly, this sprint is also the moment you identify its length, right? If it is a 2 weeks duration, then at a 2 weeks duration, it keeps on beating like a heartbeat. So the sprint is a heartbeat of the Scrum where you convert ideas into value. Okay. And the second thing is it's a fixed length duration. Usually we conduct the sprints in a duration of 2 weeks. Generally, in some of the scenarios, you prefer 1 week, where exactly that means in a exploration kind of a work where you're exploring, but the complexity is less, but you're exploring a specific framework and all. People may go in a 1 week duration. In a research kind of a work where people require more amount of time, where they may take 3 weeks or 4 weeks duration. But we do not recommend the sprint spanning more than 4 weeks. Ideally, most of the teams on the ground, they follow 2 weeks duration. Also, a new sprint starts immediately after the conclusion of previous sprint. That means there is no single day that doesn't fall in one of the sprints, right? So one sprint concludes, other sprint starts, right? Then the next one is during the sprint, no changes are made that will impact the sprint goal. Most, in most of the scenarios, we recommend please do not do any changes to the sprint backlog. So what is sprint backlog? We will see shortly. Similarly, in the sprint, we will carry out the work necessary to achieve the goal that is set for the sprint. In the sprint, we also carry out sprint planning, daily scrums, sprint review, sprint retrospective, and also in the mid of the sprint, we also carry out the product backlog refinement session also in the mid of the sprint. A sprint can be cancelled if the stakeholders feel the sprint goal is no more valid. In those scenarios, sprint can be cancelled. Only product owner has the authority to cancel the sprint. Okay. Now, let's now discuss about sprint planning, the do's. Okay. Now, the sprint planning, if you see, right, it has certain inputs, it has tasks, it has outputs, right? What the input is, first thing is product backlog. And within the product backlog, the prioritized items are on the top of the product backlog. Who will do prioritization? It will be done by the product owner. Okay. Now, those prioritized items specifically targeted for the sprint should be groomed properly. And then we need to have past 3 sprints velocity. That means the history about the team's past performance. The third one is the upcoming sprint. That means the sprint that we are going to cover. We call that as a current sprint. What is the current sprint capacity? How many hours the team is having at their hand? And the other things are definition of ready, definition of done. So We have certain tasks and we have certain outputs. The tasks are, why is this sprint valuable? What can be done in this sprint? How will the chosen work get done? Now the outputs are the sprint goal and sprint backlog. Let us discuss or learn in detail each of these things. The first one, as part of the input parameter that I have discussed here, is a product backlog items. For the people who are new to Agile, you can think product backlog is a list of all the requirements that are required for the project scope. Okay, it's a list of ordered list. That means this product backlog is a living document. That means when in the moment I'm saying living means you can always add items, delete items, modify items. Okay, we call them as product backlog items. More specifically, we call them as user stories. This product backlog consists of items related to business features, technical stories, defects, knowledge improvements, enhancements. Everything that is required for the scope of the project need to be there in the product backlog. So these are all ordered by the product owner, considering the risk, business value, dependencies, date needed. Okay, and each product backlog item is described in enough detail so that team can complete it in a sprint. So you can consider product backlog as a list of items that are required to complete the project scope. It can have business features, functional features, technical stories, non-functional requirements, defects, knowledge improvement, and enhancements. Anything that is not there in the product backlog, that means team is not supposed to work on it. So that is the sanctity of the product backlog. And this product backlog is always ranked or ordered. Okay, so this is the first input. Then I have said that whatever items the product owner is going to, prioritize for this sprint, right? So this product owner, right, he has to groom those stories, right? So how come the story should be? It should be each groomed user story should be, it's a user story should be written in its predefined template. That is, as a user, I want this functionality so that I can achieve this. See, Agile is actually asking people to write the user stories, clubbing three things. Who is requesting this feature? What is being requested? And why is being requested? This is what you can see here. As a user, that means who is requesting? I want this functionality. What is requested? So that I can achieve this. Why is this? So we are clubbing who, what, and why. This is where beauty gets built, right? So the moment you know who is requesting, what is he requesting, and why is he requesting, then anybody who opens or who looks at the story, whether it is on the product owner side, chief product owner side, business analyst side, or the development team side, so everybody understands, okay, this is requested by so-and-so person or so-and-so persona, and this is what they need, and this is why they need. Then the context around the requirement will get more, more microscopic. So people will understand it even more better. So that's why Agile teaches who, what, and why. And that is where it says, please write user stories in a template called as a user. I want this functionality so that I can achieve this. The second one is acceptance criteria. This acceptance criteria need to be written for the happy path, for the boundary path, for alternate paths, and for the failure paths. We have to write acceptance criteria given a specific context. When a trigger happens, then an expected conditions. Usually in waterfall way of execution, we write just the expected condition. But if you club context and a trigger also, then it gives more clarity to the development team in terms of the tests. So that's why we request the acceptance criteria to be written in a template saying that given a specific context, when a specific trigger happens, then an expected conditions. The third one is dependencies. The dependencies can be upstream and downstream. Upstream, I'm telling because unless the story is completed, I can't complete my functionality. That means upstream story should be completed first. Then only my current story can be started. Similarly, downstream story requires my current story to be completed. It is like a river flowing from top to bottom, right? So the top one is the upstream stories. Unless the top story gets completed, you can't start your story. Similarly, unless you complete your story, the downstream story cannot start. And then any required mockups, any assumptions, any constraints, and story points. So friends, you can refer my video on writing good agile user stories, where you can get more insights into these aspects. You can learn these aspects in more detail in my video on let's write good agile user stories. Okay, the next one I talked was the capacity of the current sprint. So how do we arrive at capacity for the current sprint? So let us assume 6 resources are working, and let's take the assumption that we are working on a 2-week sprint. That means 10 days are there. Each week, 5 days, 5 working days. And let us assume in this sprint, there is one public holiday, and there is resource 3 is going to be on leave, on a planned leave on 1 day in this sprint. So if you see here, number of days minus public holidays minus planned leaves gives you the net working days. Now, if you multiply 8 hours each, that means 9 into 8 is 72. For example, this 9 has come, 10 minus 1 minus 0 is 9. Similarly, here 10 minus 1 equal to 8. So if you multiply networking days into 2, then you get the hours. Now, you have to deduct the Scrum meetings or any other planned meetings that you are mandating team to attend. So usually, if you apply the sprint planning event, generally it's recommended that 4 hours of sprint planning meeting is required for a 2-week sprint, right? So if you do 4 hours of sprint planning and 15 minutes of daily Scrum multiplied by 10 days and 2 to 2.5 hours of product backlog grooming session, 1 hour for your sprint demo, and if you are actually asking team to have a preparation for the demo, then that half an hour, and a 45 minutes of sprint retrospective. So if you apply all those things, right, then what happens is 11 hours approximately you'll get it. So you have to deduct these 11 hours from the planned hours to get the net available hours. So if you calculate it, then 358 hours you're getting for all the 6 resources. So this is how you have to calculate the sprint capacity, right? Now, the next one I talked about is story points. Of course, friends, I wanted to let you know that, story points is a big topic in itself. But for your easy reference, I want to let you know the story points are relative size, relative way of estimating. In Agile, we say if you estimate in a relative way, that is sufficient. Because what happens is, in the name of estimating accurately, we want more details and more in-depth knowledge. So even if you have in-depth knowledge, what happens is you end up in a scenario wherein your estimates are only 70% accurate or 80% accurate in reality. So that's where Agile says, let's do a relative size estimating because it's easy, quick, and approximately 80% to 85% it is accurate. So we use planning poker cards, wherein we use Fibonacci series 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8. So we use the levers like complexity, uncertainty or risk involved, effort required. We keep these levers in consideration while doing this relative sizing. For example, here, let us assume that the bottom balls here, the red balls, let us say the base stories are 1, 2, 3. Let's assume these are all already estimated. And let us assume that we wanted to estimate the upfront balls. So compared to 1, if it is 2, it is 3, then probably this is 5. Probably this is 8. Probably this is 13. It is an imaginary number. Okay, it's an imaginary number. If this is 1, then this is 2. If this is 2, if this is 3. It's all about coming up with, a relative number for the complexity you are handling, for the uncertainty you are handling, for the effort you are handling. In some of the scenarios, people tend to directly correlate story points to effort directly. That is wrong. We should not do that, because if 1 hour job done by cycle mechanic and 1 hour job done by a doctor, a 1 hour operation done by military professionals, they are not the same. You cannot award story points based on just effort only. You have to understand the complexity. You have to award the story points considering the uncertainty or risk involved and the effort required. So for now, please understand the story points are relative numbers where we estimate it using Fibonacci series based on the dimension called complexity, uncertainty, and effort required. The third one is we need to have past performance of the team. For example, if we are in the sprint number n, in n-1, how many story points we planned, how many story points got accepted. In n-2 sprints, how many story points got planned, how many got accepted. In n-3 sprint, that means previous sprints, right? How many story points we planned, how many accepted. Not only this, we also need to have what were the planned hours, what are the actual hours spent. So that these statistics saying that how much we planned with respect to story point side and how much we have planned with respect to hours during that sprint, it will give us some insights about how do we take forward, how many story points we can take for the upcoming sprint. For example, generally people take average of last 3 sprints and they will say, okay, the average of accepted story points for the last 3 sprints, 30, 28, and 29 is 28. Okay, now this sprint, I can pick up the user stories of size 28, total size of 28 story points worth of work. So this past performance will help us how much chunk of work actually tentatively this team can accept at this point in time. So we need to have the past performance also into consideration. The next one is, okay, definition of ready. What is definition of ready? Definition of ready is a gate we apply to the product owner. So we will say product owner, unless the user stories are compliant to definition of ready, we cannot take this story to the sprint. It is a weapon given to the team, development team in agile world, saying that definition of ready stories only can be taken for the sprint. So the team is empowered to tell to the product owner that, you know, guys, the product owner, this is the definition of done. This story need to be compliant. This is how they have to tell. So, okay, this definition of ready, okay, this definition of ready should be based upon invest principle. Okay, first, the story should be of independent, right? It should be independent so that, there is no commonality between two stories. It's independent and small enough. Second one is negotiable. That means what and why, what is the story and why are we doing should be clear. The third one is valuable. That means, is the value to be delivered to stakeholders clear or not? The next one is estimable. That means, can we size this story in story points or hours? Do we have idea on complexity, effort required, uncertainty? The next one is small. Is it defined at a fundamental level? Can we complete it within a sprint? So we don't want stories to be prioritized, which actually plan itself will take three sprints. We cannot take such stories. The stories usually need to be defined anywhere between 1 to 8. Now, in the special scenarios, it should be 13, but not more than that. 1 to 8 size stories only should be there, so that we can complete the stories within a sprint. And finally, the story. So can we test the stories based upon the acceptance criteria? So if you see here, invest, independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. This is what is invest principle, based on which each team is empowered to derive their own definition of ready. So along with the support of product owner, right? And a sample DOR can be prepared. So this definition of ready is different. It varies from team to team, because along with the product owner, the team sets a definition of ready. A sample example is provided here. The user story is defined at fundamentally small level. User story is independent and clearly communicates the value. User story is defined as per the defined template. Story can be verifiable and testable with the clearly defined acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is defined for happy, alternate, and failure paths. Performance and other non-functional requirements aspects are identified where applicable. Whatever mockups we need, they are provided. Upstream and downstream dependencies are clearly defined. Assumptions and technical limitations or constraints are clearly identified. External dependencies to carry out the story are identified and resolved. Story is sizable and can be estimated in story points and hours. Team has good idea on what it will mean to demo in the story. So this is the sample or definition of ready. So you can add more, decrease more, or modify. But the question is, this definition of ready need to be kept current, and this need to be taken as a reference while accepting the story to the sprint. Any stories that are not compliant to definition of ready, we should nicely say to the product owner that we can't take up this story. So once it is compliant to definition of ready, then we can take up the story. Okay. Definition of done is relating to the quality. Definition of done is whenever a team member says it is done, that means it should comply to the definition of done rules. So somebody says done means all team agrees, guys. Whenever some people say it's done, then it should comply to these rules. So sample criteria is identified here. Unit tests are written and traced to acceptance criteria. Unit test sign-off is available. Functional test cases are written and traced to acceptance criteria. Functional sign-off is available. Integration sign-off is available. Regression test suite is kept to current. Regression sign-off is available. And UAT sign-off is available. Stakeholders go is available for production deployment. That means if the feature need to go to production, there is a change acquisition board, change advisory board. So that change advisory board has to provide a go for the feature to go to the production, and that is available, and it is deployed in production, and there's a sanity testing is done after the changes are made in the production by both the technical team and as well as the marketing team and the product team. I have marked 8, 9, 10 in green because it is not that all the criteria you have to take. There are teams on the ground who takes responsibility of shipping the increment or features till UAT, and then their scope ends there. So they have to set the definition of done only till point number 7 in that scenario. Okay, so they can add more, they can decrease more. Again, the definition of ready and definition of done are relating to the team that we are working. Okay, friends. So now I want to let you know that definition of done is more to the development team, which ensures the quality. So somebody in the development team says this item meets definition of done. That means all these items should be ready, and we trust team. For example, people demo the product in the product demo sprint review session. So they can manipulate the test data and they can actually show the desired behavior to the product owner. We believe the team should say, guys, here the test data is we corrected this test data, but ideally speaking, it is not meeting definition of done. It still requires some amount of work. So we trust team. Whoever in the team says this is done, it should meet a specific work item is done. That means it should meet this particular criteria, and it is changes team to team, context to context, and whatever I have provided is just a sample. Okay, friends, what we have covered so far? We have covered what is product backlog, what is a prioritized user story is all about. We talked about user story, acceptance criteria. We talked about mockups. We talked about assumptions, constraints, limitations, story points we have discussed about. We talked about past 3 sprints velocity. That means what was the planned story points, what is the actual story points, and what are the planned hours and actual hours. Similarly, for the current sprint, what is the sprint capacity, definition of ready and definition of done, and what are the tasks we do. Okay, so we have covered about the inputs that are required. So friends, whenever you are actually going for sprint planning, it is not like, okay, Monday sprint planning starts, so let's go to the meeting directly. It's not like that. We have to do this groundwork. Product owner has to do his role. Scrum master has to do his role. Okay, and now let's think about once sprint planning starts, what are we going to do? We're basically going to cover about three things. Why is this sprint valuable? What can be done in this sprint? And how will the chosen work get done? Okay, so these are three things we do as part of sprint planning. Okay, so as part of sprint planning, we address three aspects. Why is this sprint valuable? What can be done in this sprint? And how will the chosen work get done? Okay, now let's talk about why is this sprint valuable. See, team, what happens is usually we see a scenario wherein the product owner brings certain user stories. Okay, he brings user stories and he says, okay, guys, I brought this user story. Let's do that. It's not like that. He should explain to the team why this sprint is valuable. That means, for example, he can come and say, guys, this is the website we are working on. Okay, and then you basically say, we are going to cover the recommended for you option here. Okay, we are going to cover the recommended for you option here. As part of that, for a specific user, based upon what he purchased, we wanted to showcase items in this grid. Okay, depending upon this particular thing, saying in this grid, in this dimension, we wanted to showcase to him, saying that, guys, there is a sale going on, and we wanted to recommend you based on what you purchased in the recent past. This is what it is. So basically, what are we doing? We are not actually telling what are the user stories we're talking. We're talking about why we should do. We are connecting the development team to the stakeholder thought process. This is the role of a product owner. He should explain why this sprint is valuable. The product owner proposes that if we complete these features, it is going to improve the experience like this. It is going to increase the return on investment like this. It is going to enhance the experience of stakeholders like this. It is going to reduce the pain areas of the stakeholders like this. So basically, he should tell why this sprint is valuable. And if he opens the website working product and he explains, probably using mockups or some prototypes, saying that if you do like this, this is the value you as a team is going to add to the business. This is very important, friends. In reality, we don't see this kind of attempts. We see a situation wherein product owners brings whatever stories that got prioritized. Okay, or whatever they have worked upon, or whatever they're having clarity. They have their own limitations. I'm not saying anything to product owners. They have their own limitations, and those limitations need to be addressed. But ideally, when it comes for the sprint, you will be a very good product owner if you explain, guys, this is the working product. This is the page we're going to work upon. And this page, this is what we wanted to add. If we add these features like this, then, as a buyer, we are going to recommend certain items based upon your recent purchase trend. And this is going to increase the experience like this, the value like this. So like this, you should basically connect the development team to the business needs. Okay, so basically, why is this sprint valuable? Okay, first part is why is this sprint valuable? The next one is, okay, what can be done in this sprint? So now that you develop a recommended for you features, now what we want to do is, what is the minimum viable product for this specific feature called recommended for you tab? Okay, so whatever theme that we have taken in a sprint, what is the MVP, minimum viable product? And then what is a market parity? Okay, user story, these user stories required to build a minimum viable product or minimum viable features under this theme. And the next three user stories need to be built to get parity with our competition. That means if you just build MVP and go to market parity and build and release the software, nothing will happen. You have to have parity. Okay, market parity. That means you have to be on par with the competition. And then the next set of stories will help you to get advantage, market advantage. So What can be done in the sprint is you're basically telling the team, guys, there are total 9 stories are there. First 3, if you complete, you will get MVP. Next 3, you will get market parity. Next 3, you will get is market advantage. See the way you are connecting the development team to the business needs, right? First, you talked about why is this sprint valuable? You're basically telling the purpose of the sprint. It's not sprint goal. It's about why of the sprint goal. So when you say, why is this sprint valuable? From there, you basically define the sprint goal. So here you are talking about recommended for you for feature is important. All buyers. So basically based upon a specific buyer's recent purchase pattern, we wanted to recommend him certain items. Thereby the purchase, he can purchase it and it's more personalized. So basically you are telling that the sprint goal now is build features which are MVP, minimum viable product, and market parity features, okay, so that the recommended for you theme is enabled for the customer. That is what you're going to do, is what you're going to tell. So obviously the team cannot pick up all the stories. For example, if you see here, if the average story points the team is able to complete in the past 3 sprints, sprint on sprint average is 29. Let's assume, going with the previous statistics that I have talked in the previous slides. So if you add 5 plus 2 plus 8 is 15, 15 plus 15, 30. So somewhere around, going with your past pattern, around 30 story points worth of work is what it can be done. We're not agreeing. We're saying this piece we're cutting, and we are now going to discuss these features for this sprint. That means based upon your last 3 sprints story points. 3 sprints means not total, not 3 sprints total story points. Average of per sprint story points in taking the last 3 sprints experience. We believe that in a sprint, this team can complete 30 story points worth of work. So 30 story points can actually can cut around this here. So that's why we are saying what we can do here is minimum viable product and market parity features can be cut. This part of the piece we can work. Market advantage features for this theme called, recommended for you can be taken up in the next sprint. So when we explain this, first we are explaining this why of it, and we are actually talking about sprint goal. Next, we are talking about connecting people to the overall business theme. Third, we are actually connecting what is the minimum viable features and market parity features. And so that, basically, unless MVP features or MVP user stories are built, we can't move. And then if we just release the product with MVP features alone, then the experience of users will not be so easy, because the other competitor is their website is more better. So market parity is required. So a sense of urgency is getting built. Unless we build MVP and market parity together and ship it, things won't go, right? So this is kind of sense of urgency through transparency, through logic, through knowledge we are building within the team, and we are connecting the entire supply chain. Stakeholders, product owner, and development team. All of them are getting connected with the traceability of the knowledge. Okay, what is needed in the market? What is what product owner is thinking, and he's explaining to the development team. Now, what happens is when you establish this kind of understanding, then people want questions. Okay, you have estimated third user story as 8 story points. Can I split it into further? Okay, can acceptance criteria be more enhanced? I think you have not taken consideration of non-function requirements and performance requirements. Or can I add more acceptance criteria to this? Probably this proposed user story, it was labeled as 8 story points during product backlog grooming session in the past. But with current understanding, it may be probably we need to go for 13 user story points, because so-and-so assumptions are not true, and it requires more complex work to be worked here. So basically, to enhance understanding and confidence, there needs to be a proper conversations within the sprint. Okay, so stories are getting refined. The core here is the conversations. So based upon past performance, based upon capacity for upcoming sprint, based upon definition of ready and definition of done, we basically cut a piece of the work that, this can be done. We are not assuring, but it can be done. So basically we focus on this particular user stories, and based upon our past performance, and say probably these 6 stories we can take it up, and these 6 stories, let's go and make sure that we understand every aspect of it. Like we discussed about definition of ready, we discussed about grooming, right? When I say grooming, right, so all the aspects, right? User story should be written, acceptance criteria should be written, dependency should be identified, markups, if applicable, should be available, assumptions should be available, constraints and limitations should be available, and story point should be available. So likewise, for whatever stories that we have earmarked for this particular sprint, then we groom the user stories. And almost, see, what we say is these user stories should have been groomed previously, because if you start grooming these user stories on the sprint planning day, you can't groom. So that's why we have an event called product backlog grooming session. Okay, in the product backlog grooming session that happens in the mid of the sprint for the upcoming sprint. So ideally speaking, 90 to 95% of user stories should have been groomed. Here, just 5% of pending work only we have to do. So there should be, these stories should have been groomed previously. It's just that any delta understanding, differential understanding, we will add. Okay, ideally speaking, in a mature teams, all the stories that are prioritized for the sprint should have been groomed before even the sprint starts. And team has knowledge. It's just that they're picking up now, and they just verify, their understanding before, taking it up for the sprint. Yeah. The third one is, how will the chosen work get done? So what happens is, this is what is sprint backlog, friends. Each story need to be divided into tasks. And we don't say assignee, we say volunteer, because we want the development team to come forward and pick up the tasks. So that's why we call them as volunteer. And we have to have a due date for each of the story and for each of the tasks. What is the original effort estimated and actual effort so far? Because on the sprint planning day, actual effort will be 0. And day 1 to day 10, how many hours remaining on these tasks? So if you ask me, this is sprint backlog. Sprint backlog consists of a traceability of user story to tasks, to volunteer, to due date, to the original estimate, and the remaining effort day after day. So this is what is a sprint backlog. So we split user story into tasks. We decompose user stories into tasks, and the volunteers, due date, and effort estimation all will be done. Okay. Now this is the how they will decompose is at the sole discretion of the developers. No one else tells the team how to turn product backlog items into increments of value. That means how you do tasking and all. Nobody else will tell. The team is empowered. So the point is, if you see here, we recommend the team to divide the sprint into stories into tasks in such a way that the estimate is not more than 6 hours. There will be scenarios wherein on the ground you come across tasks that are coming across 24 hours, 32 hours. No, tasks should be defined in such a way that you can complete within a day. I'm putting 6 hours because I'm discounting 1 hour for your sprint meetings. Okay, so 6 hours, within a 6 hours, you should be able to complete a task. At that granularity, you have to define. And these tasks are technical tasks. It's only the technical team and development team can actually understand. Okay, product owner may not be understanding these stories because these are all purely technical. Till user story level, product owner and business analyst can understand. Okay, so if you see here, total effort estimate is 350. Okay, and I put actual effort is 0 because on the sprint planning day, all the actual effort is 0. And this remaining effort day after day, for example, 6 hours is left. On the next day, 4 hours will be left. On the next day, 2 hours will be left. Right. So likewise, you will be filling this. So sprint backlog is a traceability of user story versus task versus volunteer versus due date. Okay. Likewise, you actually say 350 hours worth of work is required to build these user stories. So you're dividing the stories into hours and you compare it with the amount of hours. Okay. If I look at the 6 resources are there, if number of days are 10, public holidays are 1, planned leaves are 0, or 1 person is having planned leaves here, resource 3. So if you convert it into hours, this is what is hours, and you deduct any planned meetings where you are blocking people team times beforehand, and you are actually coming up with net available hours as 358. So you have a workload of 350 hours is what is estimated, and 358 hours is available. So the team thinks, okay, I can take up this work, and then we actually commit those user stories back to the product owner saying that, okay, product owner, all the 6 stories we can take it up. In a scenario wherein the team feels it's risky to take all the 6 stories, and even though the 8 hours gap is not sufficient, we have to have a buffer, then the team goes to the product owner and say, product owner, I can't take 6 stories, I can only take 5 stories, because the 6th story is potential to potential to slip to the next spillover to the next sprint. So team's point and team's viewpoint is respected in Agile, and so they go with the logic, right? So they go with the logic, and they can explain the risks involved, they can explain the uncertainty involved, and they can say, I might take 6 stories, I might take 4.4 stories or 5 stories. It's a team opinion, and they go to the product owner, and the product owner will say, okay, in the lot of 6 stories, probably these 5 stories you pick it up. So likewise, they actually commit. Okay, so while doing this decomposition, friends, I'm telling you, if at all 6 items are there, like I just wish you see horizontal row, 6 items are there. First thing is, please do not compromise on the basics. Okay, Agile is there, everything is getting built, but the point is the old principles should not get compromised upon. You need to have a conceptual map of analysis, design, cut, and QA. So, okay, this is the story number 1, story number 2, story number 3, 4, 5, 6, only QA is pending, right? So first 3 stories, development and QA is pending, and 4, 5, 6 stories, only QA is pending from the last sprint. So basically I do an integration, and then I do a QA here on top of that, and then parallelly we'll open it for UAT, and we actually do a regression parallelly, and then we go live. So basically this kind of a mental map, don't lose it, because when you do this, then it will be helpful for you while dividing a story into tasks. The second thing is, you please need to understand the predecessors, and resource loading also you need to do based upon their skill matrix. And over the period of time, we build cross-functional teams. That's a long-term goal. But to start with, you may come across certain situations saying that, okay, guys, in the initial days, the development is going on, my QA resources, that means the testers, they are not fully loaded. You can avoid this scenario by asking them to write test cases and test planning in the initial days. Similarly, picking up the stories where the testing is pending from the previous sprint. So, or testing only pending stories, they can pick it up and they can make it to closure, right? So if you keep these things in mind while basically doing the task, saying that how will the chosen work get done? Okay, friends. Now, so far, what did we discuss? We discussed the tasks. What are we going to do in sprint planning? 3 things. Why is this sprint valuable, right? So in the previous versions of Scrum guide, people used to talk third thing as a sprint goal, but in the latest version, they are saying, why is this sprint valuable? Because even before you define the sprint goal, bring up or share the genesis of why you are circling the sprint goal. So why is this sprint goal is important? And if possible, showcase the working product, connect the dots so the team is also feel connected and connected to the product development. Tell them that in this sprint, this theme, the theme called, recommended products for you theme is what we are building. And if you build this particular recommended products for you, it is going to increase the sales. It is going to increase the personalization of our product to the needs of the customer. And this is your part of this particular building the product. So connect them to the part of progress. So they will add a lot of value, and then derive the sprint goal. And then what can be done in the sprint, we have discussed here. What can be done in the sprint can be identified by explaining, okay, for this theme, right? We have to have a minimum viable features, market parity features, market advantage features. Okay. So based upon the previous history, you are completing 29 to 30 story points per sprint. So more or less, these 6 stories is what you can consider. And then people go, for detailing those stories. They come up with the hours, and then they actually understand what's their capacity available, and required is 350 hours, actually is 358 hours. Okay, these stories I can pick it up, or I can't take all the 6 stories, probably 5 stories I can pick it up. So ultimately they define like this. In this particular session, let us assume that the team goes back to product owner and says, okay, all 6 stories we can pick it up. Okay, this is how it happens, right? So why is this sprint valuable? What can be done in this sprint, and how will the chosen work get done? Now, what are the outputs of the sprint planning? Sprint goal and sprint backlog. What is sprint goal? Complete 6 stories related to the theme called, personalization, like recommended product for you, so that minimum viable and market parity features are built. Friends, I'm telling you, on the ground, not many people understand sprint goal, including product owner. I'm serious about it, right? We are working in a situation, whatever stories, stakeholders are flushing to the product owner, the product owners are basically writing and giving. But your excellency comes in ensuring that, you connect the development team to the business needs, to the business working product, right? So you have to say, this sprint, we are actually working relating to the theme called the recommended products for you feature. And as part of that feature, we are identifying the minimum viable product as well as market parity features for that particular theme. So that's how we should be able to define. And then this is what is a sprint goal. I have these many 6 stories teams have committed. Okay, this is how the spread is all about. Okay, the next one, friends, do not forget one thing, right? Before the team commits, there is a possibility that certain influential developers, test leads, or dev leads, whatever, influential leads or influential experienced people, they are over dominating and they commit. So that's not the right. There's a principle called fist of 5. The Scrum Master says, guys, we are picking up 6 stories. In 1 to 5 scale, what do you think is your comfort level? If you are comfortable, give 5. If you are okay, give 3. If you are in between okay and comfortable, 4. If you're not very comfortable, provide 2. If you're extremely uncomfortable, give 1. So at the same time, all people has to raise the hands, right? 1, 2, 3, go, they'll say. Then all people has to show their hands. If the rating raised by people is more than 4, then only the Scrum Master should allow people to commit to the goal. When you call this fist of 5 meeting before you commit, it's like this. 6 stories is what the team is saying to the product owner that we can commit to the sprint goal. Whether all of you are comfortable to take this as a team goal. It's not individual goal, it's a team goal. As a team, see, my task, I can complete it. But the point is, are you feeling that others also complete? Because as a team, we have to achieve sprint goal. It's not individually we make centuries. As a team, we should win the matches, right? So as a team, do you think that all of us can meet this goal of 6 stories by end of this sprint? Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Show the fingers. So all the people, if they provide 4 or above, then that's fine, go and commit. Otherwise, if somebody says 2, ask, what is the risk you are seeing? Okay, do a brainstorming and ensure that their voice is heard, their risks are heard. And instead of 6 stories, probably you want to commit for 5 stories or 4 stories. Ultimately, it's a team goal, it's a shared goal, not an individual goal. Okay, friends. Now, let me go to the next one called sprint planning. Okay, so what we have understood now, so as part of this, the outputs are sprint goal and sprint backlog. What are we going to do as part of sprint planning? Why is this sprint valuable? What can be done in this sprint? And how will the chosen work get done? And at the end of the day, we do a fist of 5 exercise to ensure that everybody is comfortable with the goal that we shared. Okay, friends. Now, this so far we discussed about do's. That means how do we do sprint planning from ground zero? Now we are going to talk about some scenarios that can derail our sprint planning meeting. Okay, these are the don'ts. Okay, the first one I have observed is ability to say no to DO or non-compliant stories. That means the team knows that there are certain third-party dependencies. The team knows that to integrate so and so, they need to depend upon certain outside external people. or other teams. But the product owner or somebody else will influence them saying that, okay, by fourth day, it will get it done. But the past pattern is the fourth day will never come. So if you take user stories that are not compliant to definition of ready, you end up spilling, you end up slipping, you end up not meeting your sprint goal, and it reflects bad on the team. That's why you should say no to definition of ready non-compliant stories, and definition of ready should be made visible to everybody on the sprint planning day. Also, the definition of ready need to be modified in our retrospectives as well, depending upon the experience we gain. The second anti-pattern we have understood is partially groomed or ambiguous stories are brought for sprint planning sessions. Usually, when the product owner does not do a good job, does not do a good groundwork, if he brings partially groomed or ambiguous stories, then you take more time to groom that user story, and it is difficult to carry out the sprint planning event within 4 hours, and people lose interest. So it's important that product owner does his groundwork, and he brings up groomed user stories, and these user stories should have been groomed properly in the previous product backlog grooming sessions. The third one is ineffective estimation during sprint planning sessions. And so basically what happens is, either in terms of hours or in terms of story points, you should not be overestimating or underestimating. So that estimation capability that requires having a mental map. This is what I've discussed, right? So people should have the mental map, okay, how the flow is going about. We should not compromise on the basics, right? So how the software development life cycle, okay, what can go in parallel, what can go in sequence, how the mental map is all about. Okay, this we need to keep in mind. And if you do, if you don't take care of these basics, there's a high possibility that you do ineffective estimation. And if you do ineffective estimation, that means either you underquote your effort or you overquote the efforts. This leads to slippage of sprint goal. At the same time, you may uncover more tasks during the sprint execution. Then you'll come and say, guys, initially I thought it is around 30 hours. Now it is actually taking 60 hours. This is because our inability to do estimate well. If in case you think that you don't have clarity, you can take advantage of spike stories, research stories, and tracer bullets. Okay, these are the stories that will help you to do research, to do troubleshooting, to experience the problem, so that you have more understanding about those user stories. You can take advantage of those things. Okay, and user stories were not split to the fundamental level. What happens is, generally people will prioritize some big ticket items, like a user story of worth let's say 21 user story point size user story is given to you. That's all. This is not correct. See, I'm telling you, user stories need to be sized in such a way that each user story can be completed in a period of 5 days, 5 to 6 days, or maximum. You cannot have a user story that is planning itself, it takes 10 days. No. If people say, people come and go, oh, this is a very big story, I can't spread it further. Most probably that person is not going to the detail, or not willing to go to the detail. So user stories need to be split in fundamental level. Just like a tree has branches, sub-branches, and leaves, the user story should be mapped to the leaves of the tree, not to the stems, not to the branches or sub-branches. The sprint planning events did not start on time, and it lacked participation from all individuals of the team. See, friends, I'm telling you, this is where Scrum Master need to be very, very clear. So if you don't start a sprint planning time on time, it is important that people calendars are blocked, and if you don't complete it on time, their attention will not be there. And then there are certain people who comes with laptops and mobile phones, and they don't participate. There are certain people who apply a chosen silence, and there are certain people who will be over talking, less talking. All those things will be there. So there is a role of a Scrum Master to ensure that these things are properly coached, both formal, informal coachings, so that this sprint planning is not impacted with poor participation. If poor participation is there, these people will come and say, I didn't understand that this kind of tasks are there on the 4th day or 8th day of the sprint, and ultimately it leads to spillage of sprint goal. Subject matter experts used to show less or over involvement in the story grooming. So there are certain people, these are all dominant by nature, or these people either don't show their involvement, or they show too much involvement. And when they show too much involvement, they don't allow others, they don't give opportunity for others to speak. And there are, if they show less involvement, then they are subject matter experts. If they don't speak, it's a chaos, right? So we need to be watchful about this pattern, right? And then whenever teams could not understand the complexity of the stories, the teams don't take advantage of spike. Spike is something, then you can always ask, guys, this particular story we want you to take in the next sprint. So but for that sprint, I need to understand it a bit further. So I want a 16-hour spike. Similarly, I wanted to carry out a research story to understand what is the best possible path for that. Or I wanted to have a tracer bullet to ensure that I build a specific POC relating to the complexity that I'm referring to, so that when I take up the actual user story, the team has complete knowledge about it. So people need to take advantage of spikes, tracer bullets, research stories when they're not very clear about the user story solutioning. So they can take advantage of this, and people don't take advantage of this. They get into the sprint execution, and finally they uncover that initially I thought it's around 3 days worth of work, but now it's 30 days worth of work. And I have also heard in the ground saying that product owner has changed the requirements. This is what the development team says. Ideally, if you connect both of them, then the message will come. Because in the separation, you go and talk to the developer, he says the product owner has changed the requirements. And you go to product owner, he says, no, I have not changed the requirements. If you connect both of them, then the message comes. These people did not understand the intent of the requirement. It's basically, if the technology complexity is there, you have to take advantage of spikes, tracer bullets, and research stories. The next anti-pattern is improper story point estimation. That means when your base stories are not proper, a relative size estimation is going to be ineffective. For example, if this is 1, this is 5. If this is 10, this is into 5 tens. But the base story itself, when it is not properly estimated, then your relative size estimation goes for a wrong thing. Similarly, certain times story point estimation, people will do underestimation. Similarly, all tasks are not identified, or tasks are not clearly estimated in terms of hours. Certain people estimate over, certain people estimate lesser. So these kind of things will be there, right? We are enabling teams, but they need to use their enablement properly. Yeah. The next one is team enablement is under question. That means, there's a slowness in terms of committing. So there's an organization culture, people observe, okay, as an organization, all people are taking less stories. Why should I take? Such kind of scenarios will be there. Because all the people as a culture, they are showing as less stories. So I can also pick up less, right? Similarly, there are people who are over committing. So let me also over commit. So either aggressive commitment is problem, under commitment is also problem. There should be a proper balance. So that's why your retrospectives need to go in a balanced way, saying that, guys, this is the size of the work we have done. For a 5 story points worth of work, we spend this much amount of hours. So a 5 story points worth of work is done in 2 hours, let's say in 4 hours. Let's say a 5 story points worth of work, actual hours, let's say 5 hours. Now, do you think that we are estimating properly? So it's the responsibility of the Scrum Master to ensure that these data is kept available to this team on the retrospective day, so that they can actually reflect whether their estimation is proper or not. So Scrum Master, if you do a good job, then definitely you can bring the inefficiencies of the team to the team's attention, right? So that they reflect on it, right? So this anti-pattern you have to understand. The next one is team did not discuss user stories in sufficient detail in estimation. So they don't discuss at all. A product owner will tell something, okay, I got it. Yeah, I told you on that day, no? Yeah, all those things are done. Okay, this particular requirement, this person knows well. So once that person comes to the office tomorrow, you can pick it up. Okay. What is this? The sprint as a plan goal, right? It's basically you need to understand the requirements well. Only when How can you understand requirements well? You can understand the requirements with proper conversations. So if you don't understand the requirement properly on the sprint planning day, that means the focus should be there. When focus is not there, then you don't understand. When you don't understand, then everything goes for a toss. So people need to show proper involvement on the sprint planning day. Like the sprint planning lacked work as a team, shared goal concept. Instead, planning takes place by certain individuals only. It lacks participation and engagement from all the team members. I was telling you, before even committing the sprint goal, it is not that whether I can take care of my tasks or not, whether I can take care of my stories or not. As a team, as a shared team, can we meet our sprint goal or not? This is where I am recommending a concept called fist of five, where people say, Scrum Master asks, okay, we are taking 6 stories as a sprint goal. As a team, do you think we can meet it? So show me in fist of five. 1, 2, 3, go. All people should show a finger. Okay, 4. Somebody says 4. Somebody says 3. Somebody says 5. So whoever rating is less than 4, we should ask, why did you feel like this? Why we are asking everybody to show the fingers at the same time? Because there will, if they show at different times, they may get influenced, right? So because of that, we want them to show the fist of five rating, so that as a team, we are capable of meeting the goal. We should be first feeling confident about the sprint goal, right? Just because somebody is motivating us, we should not go for aggressive goals, because one of the principles of agile is there should be sustenance. It's not that, one sprint we make century, another sprint we will make 0 runs. It's not like that. Whatever capacity, whatever velocity we are setting it up, it should be consistently maintainable. So we should keep average capability person in mind and should take the goal. We should estimate also, while estimation also, we should keep average team member into consideration and estimate. See, for a very experienced person, he can complete in 2 hours. But an average competent person may take 6 hours. So you should put estimate 6 hours only, not 2 hours, because tomorrow this expert may be working on some other tasks. So other person, may he picks it up, he may take 6 hours. So basically make sure that you just don't own your own task, but you are responsible to make the team win, to make the team meet the sprint goal. Yeah. So this is what it is, friends. So far, we have learned in this session do's and don'ts of sprint planning session, how to conduct sprint planning meeting from ground zero. We talked about it, inputs, tasks performed during sprint planning, and output. Don'ts, around 11 anti-patterns we have covered, where that can derail our sprint planning meeting. Now I can take up questions, and I will now I keep bringing you value add sessions in the future. So please do attend and be part of this knowledge drive. Okay, with this, I wanted to take up your questions.